Diane. Okay, this place is being recorded. Did everybody get that? There probably will be those weird Zoom moments that add nostalgia because we will be remembering the quirky things probably as much as the moments of poetry and beauty. I was lucky enough to receive an electronic um, version of Diane Tucker's Nostalgia for Moving Parts. And I really enjoyed it. I didn't want to put my computer down. I was so happy to be reading it and to be taken on these really, really wonderful, imagistic and picturesque journeys of her mind. And it made me nostalgic and myself because all good poetry, I think, takes us into our own imaginations, our own worlds, and our own places of being, and in our hearts, in our souls, our minds, our spirits. And I really enjoyed the book, and I would like to, and I'm honored to open for Diane. I've known Diane for maybe 35 years, approximately. I hate to admit it, and yet I love to admit it. And so it's a great honor to open for her and her new book. And I thought I would do that with a piece called Forest Bathing, because I was thinking about what nostalgia is, and I was thinking about how I feel about the environment and how nostalgic I am for the way it was when I was a lot younger. Forest bathing. There's more to a forest than trees. Arboreal salamander, red-eyed frog, translucent as glass, whippoorwill, chickadee, hornbill, toucan, hummingbird, yellow-bellied sapsucker, acorn, woodpecker, sharp-eyed fox. There's more to a forest than trees. Scarlet tanager, buttercup, solitaire, chameleon, chipmunk, gray wolf, deer, flying dragon, lizard lord iguana, dreamflower newt, rattlebone, white stag, reevil. There's more to a forest than trees. Laughing owl, hoot hoot, omen rabbit, ladybug, black cat skull, skeleton bone, low-shoot turtle shell, orangutan, bonobo, all alone in lingo, bluebell, bird cherry, bird cherry. There's more to a forest than trees, orb, weaver, spider, fungi, moss, monarch butterfly, beetle, honeybee, earwig, ant, kinnick, foliage bug, lunatic, gypsy moth, pseudo centipede. Call me damselfly in distress, 'cause I'm a wildlife worshipping zotic mistress, a tree-hugging temptress, hemptress. It's all arboretry to me. There's more to a forest than a tree. I stand in arbor amour, in reverie. I deify all creatures in trees, the whole tree ecology, really. I can't just idolize one tree, must praise the whole of Boricolus down on my knees. Up from my roots, I pray to trees and meditate, and the trees speak to me and sing. In the wild of the world, and the wild of the wheeled, open, wide world, the woods are quiet, but never silent. I cross over unfurled and turn into a full-bodied dendrophile. Daphne, Daphne, the wind blows that curious way up my bark. Exclamation mark, I beseech you, allow me to wade in the wilderness of you. Slip into, dip into your fertile earth And there let me bathe in your girth, your grass, your sage, dear glade. Feel the ring of 1,000 lifetimes in every line as you turn my page. Voices and music wed, tingling porcupines up my spine, all quill and musk. Nothing said, nothing left unsaid by your erogenous breeze. If this be treegasm, please. Cum, 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 draconid, draconid. Cum, 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 draconid, draconid. Let us breathe together and slow. Ogham, shadow play. In harmony from floor to canopy, take me as I take you the way you are. Humanity's pheromone labyrinth, please splash me with old growth ecology in the deep sigh of phytonside. Slowly immerse my entire being deep inside till there's no line between you and I. Merge and submerge into each other's eyes. We don't disappear, but stay here in the catharsis of true nature. Cum, 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 draconid, draconid. Cum, 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 draconid, draconid. Your Ouroboros, snake, dragon eye. You are every book I've ever read. You are every word I've ever said. I've stood in a stand of many of you trees. I've taken a stand for your mysteries. I've slept in groves of ancient oak and dreamed lost sensations awake till I woke. I've danced among trembling giants as it is told all 40,000 aspen trees in the grove share a single root. And when we breathe quaking aspens 80,000 years old. In a breath of a billion leaves, in a breath of a billion leaves. In grief, I've been held in the arms of the hallowed roots beneath Gog and Magog among mists of Avalon. I've made love against the moss of Carmona to belong to the cathedral chant of peace. I have overheard Arbutus scream as she peeled back her bark, as she sang a high-pitched cry, source of essence, phosphorescent. I have seen the tears of the tree of joy in rapture, a deep song sorrow I cannot capture unless I separate my heart from knowing I am human. As I long to belong to tree, bone and bole and bark and branch in a shower of blazing stars, draconid. I've wandered, perambulated, botanical bohemian through pines and firs and cedars and cypress, in the shiv light of olive, willow, ash, ginkgo, and yew, of Bodhi, baobab, redwood, rowan, and blue birch, as they died and as they grew in my search, my endless search for Aya, cum, 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 draconid, draconid. A forest takes centuries to grow. There's more to a forest than trees. We plant, we breathe because of trees. We plant, we breathe because of trees. We plant, we breathe because of trees. It takes centuries. It takes centuries. Eco, echo, eco, echo, eco, echo, eco, echo, eco, echo, eco, echo. It takes centuries for a tree to know, to speak. Ogham, listen. Ogham, eco, echo, eco, echo, eco, echo, eco, echo, eco, echo, eco. When I finally returned to the forest, the place where I learned to love so long ago. The forest was gone, and all that was left was a hollow echo. Debris. Echo. Echo. And I fell down. And I said, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Okay, that's I guess starting on a little bit of a heavy note there. At the same time, we live in a time that is very heavy, and that is what we are facing: a great deal of sorrow and grief, and eco grief, and grief on a humanity level, and with that we will be nostalgic, and we will be nostalgic probably for this time that we are presently in eventually. And the beauty that we are able to explore now will be something precious to us. Okay. And so we go on with the celebration of poetry. As it is, we are going to have Kevin Spenst, who is the author of Ignite, Jabbering with Bong. I love that title, Kevin. And The Heart's Amok, a memoir in verse. He's also had dozens of chapbooks published, including Pray Goodbye, Surrey Sonnets, and Upend. He lives in Vancouver on the unceded Coast Salish territory, and he is going to be here to have conversation with the great Diane Tucker.
Awesome. Thank you, Sheri-D. And first of all, I'd like to just step back, and I'd like to thank you, Sheri-D. And could everybody join me in a round of applause thanking Sheri-D Wilson for a fantastic reading. Thank you, Sheri-D. That was so awesome. I love those sounds. That it brought to mind Aristophanes' the frogs, and the Greek kind of onomatopoeic expression for ribbit, which is brekkekekex, coax, 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 and I kind of heard that kind of in there as this some natural sound from far off kind of was beneath the surface through so much of that. Thank you, that was lovely. And now it is my distinct pleasure to introduce a woman who needs no introduction. I mean, you know, you're here for Diane Tucker, but I would like to add a little something. First of all, a story, a confession, I suppose. Diane maybe doesn't know this, but one of my first poems that was published actually stole a phrase from one of her poems. And it, in fact, was only at a reading at the Summer Dreams Literary Festival that I was so excited to read at this festival. I think it was 2012, 2013. It was the anniversary of a festival. And I was reading, and Diane was in the audience. And I remember reading the poem, and I was very excited because Joy Kugawa, I think, was reading later in the day. And I was like, oh my God, wow, I'm reading the same kind of bill. And I remember reading my poem, and I'd forgotten that I'd taken, like, I'd lifted just, I think it was an adjective noun combo. It was so beautiful. And I remember reading it and looking up and looking at Diane and to see if she noticed anything. And she didn't. Diane is such a remarkable poet. And of course, here we are opening up and kind of taking steps back into some of the old world that we have, and certainly making connections and hugging one another again. And I can't think of any better book to accompany us as we kind of return to our relations and relationships and being in touch with one another. Nostalgia for Moving Parts has such a beautiful heart and is so aware of connections and the connections that we have in our relationships, and certainly grief, but also play and joy. So I will do my official introduction, and I also have some technology to help me out just for fun. Diane Tucker is the author of 4 poetry books and a young adult novel. Her play, Here Breaks the Heart, The Loves of Christina Rossetti, was produced by Calgary's Fire Exit Theatre in 2013. Her poems have appeared in numerous anthologies and in many literary journals in Canada, the US, and abroad. She was born and raised and lives in Vancouver, BC. So please join me in welcoming Diane Tucker.
Unmute. Can you hear me? Yes, excellent. I'm doing myself the favor of hiding my self view because I do not want to watch myself read. Thank you again, Sheri. That was gorgeous. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you to June and Igor and everyone at Shelf Life Books. It's really, and everyone at Turnstone Press and Iron Dog Books, which is a Vancouver thing you should check out. I'm just so thrilled that you're all here. I am just excited to read these poems to you now. Oh, the way it's going to work is I'm going to read 4 poems, and then Kevin is going to ask me some questions about them. And then I'm going to read 4 more poems, and Kevin is going to ask me some questions about them. We'll talk a bit. If you have questions you would like to ask me, or Sheri-D, or Kevin, you can put them in the chat. And after that's all done, Kevin will wrangle your questions, which he will do very well. So I'm going to open up with a poem called Dream of Old Vancouver. My childhood self imagined Daddy's city in candy thick light, green and yellow neon light striping the old buildings by a great pyramid of ancient stairs. Rusted out cars shone crisp and orange as the leaves we gathered every autumn. Gas on wet asphalt, foil thin rainbow over black blessed every tar melt alley. These were the daydream scenes my father starred in, his hair greased off his forehead, always in cowboy boots, twill jacket, thin shirt, workman's wear. The beer parlor I dreamt was a fancy living room. Mom came through the ladies and escorts door and conquered with her high heels, cheekbones, dark hair rolled just right, and legs for days. All fantasies of beer parlors, dance floors, and the magical place they called the cave became a swirl of wordless convictions about the power of stockings and slick red lips. Rainy, pink-lit doorway, wet glass, ice cube clink, a woman's round-mouth laughter, promises that grew crystalline, the future a black ore I could mine for the city's jagged gems. This was how a woman earned her safety. The workman noticed you and bought you drinks. You played the well-liked woman. You went along. You threw the dice of yourself and hoped you'd win. Oh. And this one is called Danny. Skipping ropes at school, their woven heft. Steel poles around the roofed playground, the rain running down them luminous, metal melting. I'd press my tongue against a pole and drink. School was a world of delicious new textures, fat crayons, creamy manila coloring paper, notebooks, worksheets stacked fat as animal bodies, tables and chairs with shiny metal tubes for legs. Even light at school felt stronger than at home. They showed us film strips of marmalade leaves against a blue, blue sky, all Technicolor crisp. How I loved those glowing celluloid leaves. Then the cloakroom hooks, imploring curves, parallel silences in calm rectangular shadows, the pavement tap dance beat of skipping ropes. How I loved school, the sweet order of desks in grids. So I wasn't totally upset when, in grade 2, Danny with the French last name tied me to a pole with a skipping rope so he could kiss me. Danny with the round eyes, a cherub's mouth, curly hair. He was small even among the small, as I was. No doubt I'd flirted with him, grade 2 style, cute and clueless. I thought myself a lady. Were kisses procured? I bet there were a few. Soon the rope loosened and I made a dash. But Danny pushed me back. A metal pole I loved, from which I'd drunk the rain, rushed up and struck me on the bone below one eye. A shiner, it was called. I had a shiner. I'd seen them on TV, cartoon red beefsteaks on faces. Danny got the strap then, or another time, or both. He came back to class subdued, his crying eyes swollen, as if a hiding could patch up his love-starved soul. He chased girls, he lifted skirts, he stole kisses, and the grown-ups just spanked his ass? Poor Danny. Tiny paramour, tiny batterer. As long as I knew him, Danny chased the girls, staring expectantly through big brown eyes. Whatever makes boys seize girls roiled in him. That yearning he had, no strap could smack it out. And no black eye stopped me flirting. I was 7 and had imprinted on romance like a baby bird. I followed its Hollywood promises everywhere, persistent and imploring as a cloakroom hook. Thank you. And now we scoot forward in time. Oh, a very long time. And this poem is called Beth Singing. Beth is my daughter, and she is, at this point, 30 years old, even though in this poem, she's only 20 years old. Beth Singing. Beth, upstairs in her room, playing guitar, is 20 years old, hovering above my head, trailing away, a thinning white cloud. Her voice is spread wings, a swallow soaring. I remember when you were 3, and June was a rainy afternoon spent in puddles. Rhododendrons were bending and falling. You set each one afloat, a fuchsia flame in black water, until the muddy corner of the parking lot was a flotilla of shifting pink lights. You stood among them, holding one bloom against your royal blue raincoat. Beth fingerpicks now, finding each note for herself, choosing it. Her songs leak down, drip through the floor. She's tossing them aloft, pink flowers flung into black water, small, fragrant boats launched into the wind. Thank you. Nostalgia for moving parts. Retrieving the many small coins clicking in my wallet's gut, I lift the receiver, huge and heavy as my head. I'll hold it against my face and speak into it, even though it's been hanging on this aging hunk of metal in this metal box on this crumbled street corner for decades, remembering the receiver's stiff silver umbilical cord, wire packed. I drop a dime from the handful needed to wake this dinosaur from sleep. Dime rolls, falls on its back, and the sun glints at me. The receiver hangs swinging while I retrieve the dime. I hear the automated voice urging, insert your coin all the way into the empty afternoon. After the phone swallows my coins, I punch in the number. Cold square buttons resist pleasantly my index finger's pressure. I forgot how those fat receivers wrap right around your head, ear, jaw, chin, covered in inches thick plastic analog. Every word you sputter into the thing carries old weight, extraneous syllables hanging from it, time, a Baroque frill I send galloping through the wires, as though from an earlier age, hours occurring without possibility of contact. I am where I am and nothing else. I have to trust it. I rest the receiver, full of old pleadings, excuses, assurances, back on what is rightly called its cradle. The silver bracket receives it, pillow-like, the two joined like hip bone ball and socket. There is, oh, unexpected pleasure, a real click. No digital ping made to signify electricity's silent dash, but an actual blow. One antique metal bit landing on another metal bit in the dear old thing's grimy, persevering chest. Thank you. And before Kevin asks me questions, I'll just say that they've turned off their video, but the little square that says Natalie and Joe, that's my son Joe and his girlfriend Natalie. And if you saw the short film of Nostalgia for Moving Parts, Joe made that film, and I'm very proud of him, and I think he did a good job. Thanks, Joe. Okay, questions.
All right, questions. All right. So an amazing book, of course, a book that everybody's going to want to buy immediately after this, and maybe get 2 copies so you can give a copy to somebody else. It was a real pleasure reading the book in anticipation of this, and thinking of the heartbeat of these different poems. In your book's titular poem, which you just read, you write about someone using a payphone, and from the perspective of the present, everything is estranged. I lift the receiver, huge and heavy as my head. Later, I rest the receiver full of old pleadings, excuses, assurances, back on what is rightly called its cradle. The silver bracket receives it, pillow-like, the two joined like hip bone, ball, and socket. What struck me about this, along with many of the poems in the first section in particular, was that yes, there is nostalgia, but there's also play happening in the present, in the playfulness of the descriptions of the payphone in this poem, for example. Could you tell us about how nostalgia and play work separately? Nostalgia often has a bit of sadness to it, but of course there's this joy and fun in the play. And how do they work separately, and how do they work together in this collection in your thinking?
There is a sense of play, I guess, in a lot of the poems. Both playing and writing poems require, when they're their best, purest self, a heightened and focused attention on what's going on, and that's part of what we enjoy as poets, as wordplay, is attention on the right word, and also a certain openness to what's going on in the moment. You have to almost lose yourself in playing when you're really playing. I kind of hate it when people use the phrase "just playing." You're just playing. Or kids are just playing. Kids are completely serious about their playing in the most joyful and unforced way. Fred Rogers pointed out that playing is a child's job. It's their job. That's how they learn about the world. And I would say that maybe nostalgia, looking back a little, is with that sense of openness, is a kind of way we learn about, hindsight. We look back and add things up as they come closer to the present. But there's also that way of learning about the world and exploring. And exploring is a great deal of an artist's work as well. All of us, the work we do that we love, and I know there's a couple of visual artists at this event as well. That when you get lost in what you're doing, it has that freedom of play. And while I don't always have that when I write, I hope that the poems can carry that. I do. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that insightful answer. Dream of Old Vancouver takes on an almost film noir idiom, especially with that last line, you threw the dice of yourself and hoped you'd win. It's just so fantastic. I love it. When writing about the past, do you rely solely on memory, or do you use film, music, or other media or materials as vehicles of inspiration to take you back?
For this poem in particular, I totally did not need to use any other media, just in my memory. My mom loved music, old movies and music, and my mom was kind of older than moms of other kids my age. She was born in 1924. And so she had, all the great movie musicals and all the great, and she loved all the old film stars, and we would watch reruns of them on TV. And there were always a few old tunes she'd sing around the house. She taught me that weird old tune, Mares eat oats and does eat oats and little lambs eat ivy. Blew my mind, that one. It sounds like this, but it's really this. It's fantastic. And my dad also even had a couple of, even though he was not such a word person, a couple of tunes he'd sing us when we were young. He'd sing us Big Rock Candy Mountain, and When the Red Red Robin Comes bobbing along, and that music and those movies, they really made up my earliest ideas about the world. So about the glamour of the grown-up world. That was what I think that was the thing that I was thinking about. Grown-ups grow up and do glamorous things. And if anybody doesn't know what the Cave was, it was a nightclub, which my parents and my aunts and uncles would go to, and I've seen pictures of it, and it was very, very Mad Men glamorous.
And it's fantastic. You can still see those separate entrances when you pass those old pubs on Hastings Street.
Men only, ladies and escorts, which I again thought was super weird, but that's what it was.
Yeah.
And I've never actually been, I must admit, to a beer parlor. I imagine it's more Spartan than I imagined it was.
Oh, thank you for that answer. So if you, audience at home, suddenly find yourself overcome with a question, feel free to drop it in the chat. I'll copy and paste it and save it for later, and then I'll ask it to Diane after she treats us to some more poems.
Excellent. Okay. Now, still have to look at my order here. Okay. So I'm reading books pretty much from in the order that they occur in the book. So to a poem called The Day Before My Father Died. There are moments I ache to be the maple outside my father's hospital room window. Just standing there, she ministers healing and need never worry about where to be or what to do with her slender, dark arms. All her leaves, leaping at the ends of her fingers, flutter love. Maples never need come in out of the cool. They drink wind like water, make air lace of the breeze. Compared to them, I am a dead thing in this quiet, clean room. A husk, a bunch of snapped twigs tossed in a chair, watching my father sleep, listening to his rough, dusty breathing. I am leafless, empty. He's drifting away, his skin glowing with near invisibility. He is slipping into perfect submission like the maple, escaping this pale box where nothing grows.
Mhm.
Still thrifting. This dyed-in-the-wool thrifter sees only dirt now, sees age, wear, old skin cells between the stitches. Long ago, I saw new to me, saw novel shapes and colors, human history I could don and sport, windows full of story, happy liberty of someone else's sloughing off. Now I imagine the oily cupboard this cream jug crusted up in. Almost smell the deathbed this button jar surely skulked beside. Still, I'm here, felt faintly the old pull, mystery of buried treasure, some ghost of the old pirate joy. But now necklines stretch wearily, hems unravel, grease spots dot lapels. Nothing, I notice, hangs straight. Asymmetry has lost its former charm. All I think of after a time is where and how soon I can wash my hands. The only shiny thing is the memory of that old thrill. The sky-colored skirt, say, where would I be able to wear it? What ecstatic entrance could I make? But those days are ashes. The thrift store sells nothing but death in mariachi frills. No bright orange hours are going to happen. I'll take the answer. Stars crowd into every black parking spot for this summer night show. Those that throw themselves into their own descent, incineration, and for a second leave a silver gash. The sky knows how to heal itself quickly. I wait for these moments, brief wounds, shifts in the night's twinkling stillness. Each one falls under your gaze. Each flaming particle speaks you. Each speck of light racing its miraculously unimpeded path from black there to burning here. Each bears the fingerprint, a signature so blazing it burns and burns forever. There's no night now when it doesn't burn, your fingerprint everywhere, on everything. Now I lay me down to sleep, and the prayers that fight up through me make a sort of hum, though I am tattered and prone to deafness. Still, I'll take the answer you give me. Yes, no, silence, whatever. Even stars, burning through the ceiling and through me, making my body a light that cannot be hidden.
Mm.
Thank you. And I'm going to finish with this one called Begging Bowl. Begging Bowl. Through this morning full of glowing blush blossom, this day of bright height, I walk, a bending silence, along avenues of starling talk, crow banter, jay scream, sparrow chatter, pigeon stare. I carry myself an empty bowl, a bucket, birds in the air, spinning around my central emptiness. I am asking their blessing on this hollow that stays hollow, this basket of darkness, this ready grave, rootless garden running the length of my whole strolling core. Breeze, every breath blows in circles around my emptiness. Every step I step protects the skyless void. I walk and walk through the leaf canopied streets, yards draped in continual flowers. My aging heart gapes, a begging bowl. These two trembling hands are always ready, cupped. Thanks.
Gorgeous. Thank you, Diane. So, as I said before, I've got a couple of other questions, but please
Sure.
feel free, other people at home, wherever you are, if you have a question, drop it in the chat, and we're happy to kind of, I'll pass it along to Diane. So my first question is, in the day before my father died, well, we have a very quiet and beautiful poem of loss and grief with an underlying attention to wind, as it perhaps relates to spirit. To quote from the poem, all her leaves leaping at the ends of her fingers flutter love. Maples never need come out in the cool. They drink wind like water, make air lace of the breeze. The poem seeks solace in the nearly invisible. And the last poem in Nostalgia for Moving Parts, which was the penultimate poem of your reading, is addressed to a higher power. Each flaming particle speaks you, each speck of light racing its miraculously unimpeded path from black there to burning here. Each bears the fingerprint, a signature so blazing it burns and burns forever. How important is faith, however it might be defined, in your poetry, and how might nostalgia be related to faith?
Well, I'm a Christian, and Christianity is a faith of the word, a faith of the book and words. The Bible is full of masterful poetry and perfect metaphors, and attests to the power and necessity of words. So I have faith in what poetry can do and what only poetic language can do. There are things that only poetry can do, largely because of that history and that tradition. Is I think why I have that faith. And even the whole history of English literature is full of woven through with biblical references and metaphors. I am really intrigued by your connection between nostalgia and faith. Nostalgia, I looked it up, comes from the ancient Greek words that mean homecoming and pain. So many poems that we read, I mean, all the poems ever, are expressions of that ache that seems to persist in us for a safe place or an ideal state that we feel we've lost or that's just out of our reach. And the Bible also infrequently encourages us to look back, to remember, don't forget. Don't forget the children of Israel in the desert after they've been freed from Egypt. Don't forget, don't forget. Tell your children, pass it on. In some of the Psalms, also the poet speaks his own heart out of a despairing state by intentionally remembering God's actions in the past and by remembering his own experiences in community when I would go to the house of God, when I would be with all my brothers and sisters, and we would sing. These memories bring the psalmist back to himself and back to reality. So I know that nostalgia these days can be a sentimentalizing of the past. And there's a way in which that's actually really bad. We know, looking at our own past in this country, that we need desperately to stop sentimentalizing it. It's a very bad idea. But I think I really mean the word as that pain and that ache for home. It's more akin to Lorca, Gabriel Lorca. God, I'm going to get his name wrong. I'm so educated. It's more akin to Lorca's definition of duende, which was a Spanish word for like a spirit or a goblin that was about the taste of darkness and sadness and death that exists in everything. And I think that's more, that is what I mean by that. And if we have time, I actually found a quotation about this, about duende, by Nick Cave, the musician, who apparently did a lecture once on the love song and totally applies to poetry. The writer who refuses to explore the darker regions of the heart will never be able to write convincingly about the wonder, the magic, and the joy of love. For just as goodness cannot be trusted unless it has breathed the same air as evil, the enduring metaphor of Christ crucified between two criminals comes to mind here. So within the fabric of the love song, and I would say within the poem, within its melody, its lyric, one must sense an acknowledgement of its capacity for suffering. So that's what I have to say about that.
That was awesome, Diane. Oh, such a rich answer. And we got the Bible, we got Nick Cave.
You came up with incredibly rich questions.
There's a really great scene from Mad Men that has Don Draper explaining duende over a Kodak commercial advertising kind of thing.
The carousel. Oh,
yeah.
Big Mad Men fan. Yeah.
Fantastic. Your last poem that you read, which I love so much, Begging Bowl, it follows a poem called Little Grief with the line, "So here I've emptied a pocket." Begging Bowl seems to amplify this emptiness in its central metaphor. My aging heart gapes a begging bowl. These two trembling hands are always ready, cupped. Quite a few poems in the collection seem to work this way, amplifying an idea or image here or there. When you write, do you find yourself consciously working through images and metaphors? Or is it in the book editing stage that you're treated to this kind of marvel of synchronicity and song? And at this stage, you start pairing and lining poems up to play along this pattern.
It's true that I almost always begin writing a poem centered around a specific kind of metaphor or an image that I can't shake. That's new to me. And just like my whole life, that connection that exhilarates my brain when I make that connection. But I'm never writing a book. I'm always just writing a poem. It's never been my strength to assemble poems into a manuscript. They say that there's a way in which the poet writes the same poem over and over for their whole career, and in that all her poems just kind of boil down to a certain set of questions or concerns that find their way out through the poet and through the poems. And maybe that's the synchronicity that you're catching in this book. Yeah, I think that might be it.
Nice, thank you. And my last question before we turn it over to our home viewers is about the grief in the poem Still Thrifting, a poem that comes after the loss of both parents in earlier poems. Well, it's set in the spring, in a seasonal pattern that organizes all of the poems in Nostalgia for Moving Parts. This contrast of loss and spring makes matters even more heartbreaking. The only shiny thing is the memory of that old thrill, the sky-colored skirt, say. Where would I be able to wear it? What ecstatic entrance could I make? But those days are ashes. There are so many layers to the arrangement of this book. When did you start writing the poems in this collection? And can you share with us any of the aha moments that went into its overall creation? And perhaps if it's not in the thinking of a book, maybe just in terms of the thinking of poetry as you kind of wrote, as you worked poem by poem.
Yeah, the poems actually range in this book from a couple of years old to a couple of decades old. They're a lot of stuff from all over the place. And when Turnstone accepted the book, it was in a very different form. But I had an amazing editor who pushed me to persevere and find more of a through line or a journey in the book. And I reordered and revised and retitled more poems than I ever have in a book before. because she was just like, but maybe you could just push it a little this way. Maybe you could just not be like, are we going back to that well again? Yes, we're going back to that well again. And I just appreciate it so much. And so that's what I did. And I'm very pleased with how it turns out, and that kind of persevering in other books, much as I love my other books, but I would more arrange them into a manuscript in a way I thought would work. But I don't think I paid near as much attention to going back and revising individual poems to kind of make them fit a narrative, which I don't think it violates any of the poem's original intent at all. I can't think of any aha moments right now, except for that whole process of being willing to basically dismantle and reassemble the whole manuscript. Takes them out, puts them in, and never, I'm a bird in the hand kind of person. So you have the book, just gonna publish the book, just don't wreck the book. But I kind of walked into it and trusted my editor, and yeah, and that was like, oh, this can work. I can find more in a poem that I wrote 20 years ago in relation to these other poems. So that was a real gift to me. I really appreciated that.
Nice. And we, your readership, appreciate that dismantling and putting it back together, because it's a beautiful, beautiful collection.
Thank you.
All right, so we will open things up. And if you have any questions that you've been hiding from me, now's the time to put them in the chat. And that's a poem for either Diane or Sheri-D. If you have a poem, if you have a question in the form of a poem. If you have questions, please feel free to ask them, and the poets will answer. And I have one question for both poets, and it's to do with trees, because trees figure so prominently in Nostalgia for Moving Parts, and trees figure so centrally in Sheri-D's reading. What's up with trees?
What's up with the trees? Go ahead, Sheri-D. Oh, I think you're muted, Sheri. Oh, there you go.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say, Diane, that was a beautiful reading, and I really, really, truly enjoyed it. And it was great to hear the poems. I've read them, and I now love them even more. And so thank you for your reading.
Thank you.
Beautiful. And I love the piece about your father. It spoke to me very deeply. Also your daughter, but your father, because I noticed trees a lot around the time of my father's going to spirit as well. And I thought I heard him in the wind in the trees for years after that. So I think there's in some kind of that and some kind of stones. But for me, the poem I wrote about 10 years ago, where I was going to Vancouver and I was in the rainforest, and I was just so overwhelmed by the loss of the trees, and not only the trees, but the life. And I thought it just spoke to me, my soul, about what's happening with the environment. And having lived in Calgary and, you know, fought for the environment so much here, I think trees are a good, they speak to all of us. And I have always had conversations with trees since I was a child. And I think, more and more people are starting to listen to trees and the language of trees, what my family calls Alchem, which is the language in it's a Celtic word. It's the language of trees. And there's actually an actual language that is the language of trees that my father spoke of quite a bit in his lifetime. And so there's all those little connections. And what about you, Diane?
Well, it's interesting because I grew up in a city, and I grew up in a city that, but that has a ton of trees. We're very fortunate. I just realized in the last, seeing, some cities and things in the news and things that don't have trees. I'm like, my first thing that comes into my head is, how do you live without any trees there? And I remember going, out to the tree that was growing in front of our house and spending ages when I was a little kid. The neighbors just thought I was the crazy child, watching the ants at the path where the ants go up and down the trees. I would watch them for ages. I think a lot of maybe us who are poets or whatever, it's kind of like crows. There's a lot of crow poems in BC, in Vancouver, and there's a lot of tree poems because they are such a almost like, what's that fancy literary word? Synecdoche. When it's a small thing that is a symbol of a large thing, they're a synecdoche for life. I mean, in the Celtic tradition, there's the tree of life, and in the Bible, there's the tree of life, because you've got all the sort of symbols of growth and rootedness, and it's and it all kind of fits all together.
And the Kabbalistic tree of life.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I watched Ants too as a child.
Yeah.
And we have a hand. There's a hand up out there. Sheila also excellent. Yeah, I think
absolutely watched Ants.
Yeah, are you a poet, Sheila?
Oh yeah, Sheila's a fantastic poet.
Amazing. So it's a poet prerequisite.
It sounds like this is.
I think so.
Resume.
This is the beginning of an anthology. The anthology about insects.
The line of ants at the tree. To footnote this conversation about trees, there's a fantastic article in the Georgia Straight, which you can read online. The poet, Canadian poet, Rita Wong, writes about old growth logging, and she's been at one of the protest camps. And so this is a very timely conversation with the old growth logging that's happening right now in British Columbia. All right, so we'll wait. So I teach from time to time, and I know that if I ask a question and I don't give you time to answer it, it's not genuine. It's not a genuine question. So I'm going to ask one last time.
Sheila was going to say something, I think.
Oh, sorry.
Oh.
Yeah, Sheila.
Oh no, I'm done for now. I'm just thinking.
Okay.
Good. You keep thinking. You think good.
Yeah. Does anyone have a question for either of our poets? If not, that is fantastic. I watched the faces of members of our audience while our poets were reading, and it was so wonderful to see people nodding at certain words and smiling, and hearts kind of reddening and emerging. And we have had a fantastic evening of poetry. And I'd like to thank all of you for coming to this event and for giving the poets your beautiful attention. And I'd like to thank Shelf Life Books for hosting this fantastic event. And I'd like to thank Sheri-D Wilson for opening things and getting us started in such a transcendental realm of a canopy of sound and trees. And of course, Turnstone Press, thank you so much for putting this gorgeous book out into the world. The cover is fantastic. And
we had a question.
Hold up the book.
We couldn't fit on the thing. Wait, Ron was wanting to know the story of the cover.
The cover is, in fact, let me just put my selfie back on. The cover is a photograph that I took of, if you can see it, of that typewriter.
Oh my gosh.
Which belonged to Sue's, my mother-in-law, Sue, wave your hand, Sue's parents, and came from their house. And when we were asking me about ideas of the cover, is one one of the pictures I sent them, and Melissa McIver at the press just went and did a bunch of cool stuff, effects to the photo, and designed a beautiful cover. I'm very pleased with it too.
What a talent, Diane Tucker. What a talent. And I mean, you're surrounded by talent. Your kids are so talented.
Yes, they are.
I'm looking at Joe, who I think I met years ago when he came out to show support for a reading. I think he was one of the 3 people in the audience. It was a micro audience. I'd organized this.
We're all used to that.
It was a 10-minute reading in the afternoon at the Paper Hound bookstore, which is like a small spot. And so really, it was just only for the 3. And Joe came. And
but in there, it felt full.
Yeah, awesome. So yes, if there are no other questions, one last giant raise the roof round of applause for Diane Tucker.
Unmic yourselves.
Oh, I can't hear
Everybody unmic yourselves, and then you can yell things at her. Yay!
Thank you guys for coming. Mwah. Thank you. So.